Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Final Fantasy XV. It finally came out. I played it on the PS4, it's available on the Xbox One as well. In Final Fantasy XV, you play as Noctis, the prince of a small kingdom, and basically this kingdom, not always, but seems to be kind of at odds with the Empire, and while there was supposed to be a peace treaty, that all goes completely wrong, and, well, that's really where the story begins for Noctis. Noctis and his personal guard slash buddies are supposed to go on a road trip to basically take him to his wedding, and, well, that's when his kingdom comes under fire. He's not really able to go home, and he has to become the hero and king that his country needs. And that's the journey you go on in this game. That having been said, I really enjoy the story, but I do have to nitpick a bit. There are a few times where I feel like a little more explanation is necessary. There were times where stuff started going down, and I'm sitting there going, well, why am I involved in this? And then it's explained very loosely, and I'm like, oh, okay, I guess. But I would have liked a bit more explanation here and there. The audio in this game is absolutely fantastic. I'm really impressed by it. The voiceover work is magnificent. Obviously, they've put in a lot of time and effort to find the right people to portray these characters. They've also clearly spent a lot of time on the music, the animal noises, the fighting noises, the car noises, etc., etc. All of it comes together to help breathe life into this world, this game, make it a much fuller experience. Also really enjoy one of the many nods to previous Final Fantasies in this game, in that you can buy the soundtracks, or at least samples of the soundtracks from previous Final Fantasy games, and listen to them while you're driving. So when it comes to the gameplay mechanics and how the game really works, it's very different from any of the previous Final Fantasies in a lot of ways. One of the things that's really, really different is the combat. It's much more open and action-oriented. It feels a bit more like Kingdom Hearts, but it's still very different from that even. The combat has both the active system and the wait system. I recommend the wait mode so you can scan your enemy, find out what their weaknesses are, and then you can go into your menus and tweak your gear, tweak your magic, so that you are better able to combat that enemy. And you can do it with any enemy, almost on the fly, not quite. What it boils down to is you end up holding the attack button and maybe switching weapons, maybe doing a few other things to tweak what's going on, activate your teammates' moves, but the combat itself is actually very simplistic. You can guard and dodge, but timing that correctly is very difficult. And so I generally just went in and beat the crap out of everything, took my licks, spent the money on potions. A feature that has appeared in a previous Final Fantasy game, as well as plenty of other RPGs, is that there's just a ton of side quests now, and that's where you get a lot of your experience. That's where a lot of the leveling comes from, is doing as many of the side quests as you possibly can. Some friends of a friend of mine were complaining about that, and I was like, well, what's the problem? You're extending your time in this world. I don't see an issue with that. I personally really enjoy the side quests. And if you don't want to, you don't have to focus on them. You can go and do just the main story if you want to, but then you're just going to have to grind out levels the old-fashioned way of just going after monsters, whereas you could at least do these quests, get money, get items, and get experience. A new unique system for the gameplay is that when you're out in the wilderness fighting monsters, completing quests, etc., you get experience, but you also get ability points. And you can use the ability points whenever you want to, but the experience just gets stored up, and it doesn't actually go into your character to level you up until you camp out or go to a hotel, something along those lines, or at the end of each chapter. I thought that was an interesting way of doing it, and I tended to sit around and save up as much as I could and then cash it in all at once and go up by like 5 to 10 levels at a time. When it comes to the controls, they are very, very good. The driving controls are a little weird. It's a little bit more like being on a rail and choosing where you want to turn and stop, but they work well. And the controls, for the most part, are excellent. I did have some issues with the lock-on, and that's not really a control issue, I guess. It's just they don't make it very clear whether or not you're properly locked on. I feel like that could be a little bit more noticeable as to whether or not you're locked onto a specific enemy. And lastly, the graphics. This is probably one of the most beautiful games I have ever played. I am just floored by how good it looks. I think this is one of the best looking games on console out there. Just absolutely one of the best. The amount of detail that goes into all the characters is just really astounding, and you have to take a moment to just sit there and absorb it. Like, if you've been out in the wilderness for days on end and not gone to rest at like an inn, then your character will get all dirty. And so you'll see like a clean version, and then you'll see like in a cutscene, they've got all this dirt and grime all over their face and their clothing. I think details like that are just really impressive. Also, this world that they have built is just, it's a beautiful world. Like I said, this is a beautiful game. From the scenery to the characters, from start to finish, it is a gorgeous game. Also, and while it doesn't really affect the game in any way, shape, and or form, I really enjoy all the little nods to previous Final Fantasy games. Like I mentioned before, there's the soundtracks from the previous Final Fantasy games, but then there's also things like the Midgar Sormer. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but it's a giant cobra-looking snake monster, kind of like the Midgar Serpent from Final Fantasy VII. Awesome nod. I like things like that. I think it's pretty damn cool. A lot of the weapons have names from previous Final Fantasy games. I like little things like that for the old school fans like myself, but this isn't a game just for the people who have played all the Final Fantasies. This is a Final Fantasy that literally anyone can get into. It's there for the new people, it's there for the old fans, which I think is really cool, because I want more people to come into gaming. I want more people to love the same games I love, and different games that I love. And I think this is a cool game because it's good for people who haven't played Final Fantasy before. At the end of this day, is it the perfect game? No. Is it a great game? Absolutely. This is one of my favorite Final Fantasies in years. And I've enjoyed a lot of the previous ones that a lot of people didn't, but I enjoy this one way more. This is absolutely a recommend. I think if you're interested in RPGs, it's worth giving it a go. I think if you're an old school Final Fantasy fan, it's worth playing. Okay, so in the comments below, why don't you tell me how many Final Fantasy games you've played? Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one.
This sounds like you're having fun.
I want to ride my chocobo all day. Can't get it out of my head.